Um, so like you said, most people will connect inflammation to injury or infection. And that's how it is. So when we get a flu, our body will be inflamed because our immune system will activate and take out all these different immune cells to help with fight the infection, to help fight the infection that we have. And when we talk about silent chronic inflammation, it's not an acute response to anything particular. It's more like a whole body response to what's going on in the system in and of itself. So that could be, for example, if we have a lot of visceral fat, which is fat around the organs. So usually that's belly fat. And if there's a lot of fat around the organs, that tends to be very metabolically active fat. And that fat is excreting these inflammatory cytokines. And because there is so much of the fat around our bodies, it tends to be very systemic. So it's all around. And because it's not a massive source of, there's no infection, there's no injury, but it's all around the inflammatory response, it tends to be system-wide where the inflammation is residing. And there isn't an external pathogen that's causing the response. It's something that's happening internally. The cells themselves are out of balance. There's too much fat, and they are creating these inflammatory signals to the body. And usually that type of systemic inflammation will then stay chronically active, and that's why it's called chronic inflammation.
Why is it bad though?
Sorry?
Why is it bad?
Because these types of inflammatory responses will start to, they constantly cause the body to use more energy than they would in normal circumstances, because the body needs to activate constantly the immune system to fight that inflammation and to try to put it down, because our body of course tries to go back to the homeostasis, back to equilibrium, and it needs to actively use resources to try to put it down. And so we're constantly using more resources to fight that inflammation. And that's one of the reasons why for example, it will affect our brain. Like, we don't have as much energy to use for our thinking and our mind because it's being used to other things in the body. And also because the brain might be inflamed as well.
Yeah. So, okay, I get it. So it's like an unnecessary drain on your resources.
Yes.
That means you've got less resources available to fight an actual real problem if it persists.
Yes, and also the cells are malfunctioning. So the inflammatory response and the inflammation within the body is causing the cells to malfunction. So, for example, in the gut, the inflammation will cause the gut lining to become looser, and so more things will be able to go through the gut. And so that's just an example that the gut lining malfunctions and more things are able to penetrate it and get into the bloodstream. And the same thing goes throughout the body. Our mitochondria doesn't function as well as it could under inflammation. The energy system, like mitochondria, are the energy houses of our cells, and they are malfunctioning, which is one of the main causes why metabolic illnesses are also related or connected to fatigue or tiredness.
So when we say that people who are overweight are more susceptible to illness, they're impacted more by an illness or a pathogen or something like that. That is, so their ability to fight that off. That is mainly, or their inability to fight that off or deal with it less well than someone who is healthier.
Yeah.
That's mainly down to microinflammation.
Yeah, it's huge risk. But there's, so like I mentioned, that when our body is under that inflammation, we use more of our energy resources to fight that inflammation. So our bodies will also use more of the micronutrients that otherwise we would use for fighting external pathogens, but now we're fighting the internal system. And so we're more susceptible to taking those external pathogens because we don't have the necessary system to fight the external pathogens. But there's also so many other reasons for that. So it's also like our blood pressure is not as functioning as it could be. We could have too high blood pressure. Our blood sugar is not regulated as well as it could be, so that makes us more susceptible to certain types of pathogens. Also, the peripheral circulation functions worse when we're overweight, and that makes us more susceptible to like delayed wound healing, for example. So it's just it's this vicious cycle that's created. The more tired we are due to this inflammation, and deconditioning because we're not moving enough, the less we have energy to make any lifestyle changes. So then it becomes this circle of I'm too tired to make a change, and then my body gets more tired because I'm not making any changes. And so many of us will get into this rut of just feeling stuck with where we are.